You're live.
Oh, he's here. I'll give it a little bit of wait. Yeah, I'll give it a little time. All right. So we are live. We're waiting for Councilman Jackson. He is here and should be joining us momentarily.
Hello.
Hi. Just had to set the kids up.
Well, yeah, perfect timing. We'll call the meeting to order, and it is 4:00. And let the record reflect that all committee members, personnel are present. I don't see anyone here for public comment, so if someone joins later, we'll give them the floor. But we can go ahead and move on to the agenda item for discussion, which is the filing of the internal auditor vacancy. So what you have in front is just the draft from the previous job description. Also put the questions in there from internal, when we had previous employees or candidates that were interested. I think those questions were in there, or
did not
they were
publish them.
sent.
I did not want questions published.
Gotcha.
So that if we chose to use the same questions, they wouldn't be
Yeah.
already out there.
Thank you for that. So with this meeting, it's just preliminary meeting to discuss really how we would want to proceed. And just to give a little bit of context and the background of what came out of the municipal committee on audit, and Trini, feel free to jump in if I miss anything. We had a audit process. So there was a four-prong approach, and there was planning, field work, reporting, monitoring, and follow-up. So that was across the board from all of the various departments, as well as any outside review or auditing for project management. So outside of the four-prong approach, there was also 18 points. So that kind of gave us a indication of where we stood when it came to dispersing out what that audit process was. So, and then if there was something that was pertinent, we would bring that to the attention to the internal auditor, and then that would be cascaded out to the rest of us on the committee, and then eventually to the body of. So with that, there were some conversations on capacity and getting things back in a timely manner. And so we want to make sure we're mindful of how we're going to take this next approach so that we make sure the next auditor has the tools and the resources and the time and commitment to execute the plan, as far as making sure that we're getting all of the appropriate timeframes in a professional and a timely manner. So that is what our current municipal conversations have been on audit. Did I miss anything?
No, you captured the high level main points.
Okay. So with that, just really want to open up for conversation and dialogue to how we feel we want to move forward when it comes to the internal auditor. Do we want to continue the process of doing open interviews, posting the position, or do we want to look at maybe a deeper approach, potentially RFP, contracted out on a bigger scale? So open to the conversation. Any thoughts?
I have a question.
Mhm.
This might be for the city attorney. So I heard you say, so there's like an individual that applies through is it through the HR?
Yes.
Okay. Or potentially a RFP, like a request or proposal. Does it matter like how this person comes, and or can this person be a part of a firm or something, and like this is like one of their contracts, as part of the firm?
Sure, that's a good question, and I'm not sure off the top of my head what the answer is. This is the first time I'm hearing about the potential for doing an RFP for the services, so I will need to take that back. I've got some question about the charter obligations and things like that, so if it.
Yeah, I think it's just open.
Because I think that was 2019.
Yeah, we did an RFP in 19 or 20.
That when the line came on.
Nope. No,
Eric,
Peter was,
second time.
Peter was either vice president or president at the time because he is the one that spearheaded it.
Was there any response to it? Do you recall?
I believe. Gosh, I would have to look. I feel like it fell all within the timing of, the agencies that we sent it out to. Had conflicts. It was right around COVID. It was kind of that whole
Yeah.
that
So I
whole
see a
timing.
March 23, 2020 date. which
Yep.
is like,
Yep,
Right.
right at COVID.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
so, yeah. I'd like to look into that a
That
little
would be
bit.
great.
If it is agreeable to the
Mhm.
committee to bring it back.
Okay,
Thank you.
May I make another comment?
absolutely.
So I think one of the things, just talking to the internal auditors over the years I've been here. I mean, it does compensate fairly well, I think financially, like actual dollar sign. But I think like with post-COVID and the hybrid schedules and all that, it's hard to keep a very qualified person, I feel like, locked down. No offense, Sherry, because you're qualified and you stay locked down. But to be locked down in their office when I think the work can be at least partially done, otherwise you heard from the city treasurer who says like, when you have to really focus is when people are off site so that they can lock in on that. And I mean, I'm the same way when I work. So maybe we could consider that. I think that for Eric Brewer and who was previous to a few people, even our, what's her name? Emily, and then Charles. I think if we had like hybrid, they would stay longer, and I think we want them longer, so we don't have to do this all the time.
Yeah, I have a comment, kind of piggybacking off of that. Not only the hybrid option, but it's a comment in question. The comment is, I think that we should take steps to ensure that this is a competitive position, that we are able to, maybe look at what does hybrid look like? What does, what are the pros and cons of this specific role being in person versus having a hybrid flexibility to it? Also, my question would be for maybe some of our council members with more longevity than I have, and for our office manager, I'm interested in identifying some of the barriers or issues that have come up with our previous auditors that have been hired in and left. Since I've been on council, the year and a half, we've had 3 separate people working in this position. And so I'm just curious, past that time span, prior to that year and a half, what are some of those identified issues or barriers that have come up over time? Is there a trend?
Yeah, that's a good question. And if you don't mind, Ms. O'Leary, if you can shed some light, if possible, I know there's confidentiality pieces to it, but is there any sunset conversations or interviews as our internal auditors are transitioning to other opportunities or no longer just wanting to be part of this position? Is there anything or barriers that stand out the most or that you've seen over the years for our auditors?
I can't speak to anything specifically when it comes to council staff. I know a lot of times, I'll speak generally, for city hiring, there's lots of applicants that do look for those hybrid and remote roles. And we understand there's some roles that, cannot do that because of the need of presence in the office. But I think that can be a barrier to getting more applicants and a wider pool of applicants. So that's what I can speak to just generally.
I think my other question to that and to Councilwoman Pelli-Monagu's point, the charter and how it's worded currently. And I believe it speaks to an on-site role with the internal auditor. So we may have to consider that portion as well. To both your points and you as well, Councilman Jackson. So just to keep that in mind as well, because I feel like there was a small portion of it where it may have spoke to reporting. Well, it didn't speak to the remote aspect of it, but it felt like the language alluded to the point where the internal auditor had to be on site. So I think we can even look at that just to keep that as a high level piece when we look at how we're going to proceed forward. It could be misinterpreted in multiple ways, but we can also look at that when it comes to our job description. So if we need to reword or change, it looks like it's been drafted quite some time, many times over the years. So we could look at what that job description would look like. Councilman Pelibando.
Thank you. So I will say, I mean, I'm open to discussing a variety of options here. I have looked at the past job postings for this position. And I think that there's an opportunity, whether we determine that this position could be hybrid, or if we determine that it's best to keep this as an in-person work position on site. I think that there is a section in the job posting where we can clarify that so that when applicants do apply, they understand clearly what the expectation is. And so however we decide to move forward, that's there's some language that we could introduce as we get further into those conversations.
Any other thoughts besides looking at OCA? Lisa, you'll check on the RFP language and what that looks like. You all can receive the job description. So if there are any strike throughs that maybe we can bring up more up to date, we can look at that and then bring it to our next meeting. And if there are any other suggestions, once we get the information from OCA on the RFP, Councilman Jackson.
Just to add to OCA's plate to ask their opinion if the charter allows for, based on their opinion.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
You're welcome.
Yes, Councilman Collins.
So I guess two things. With the previous auditors, I think one of the issues that we run into is the city takes them. The last two Drew, and I realize the Ovation is not the city, but it's still tied to the city. So both of those auditors were taken by the administration. So my question is to Lisa, can we put a non-compete clause within this contract so we can keep them here rather than as soon as we get them in, 6 months later, you know, they're the controller.
Sure. I have thoughts and concerns. I will speak with the city attorney about that.
Okay. And I think the second thing is, I don't mind the hybrid thing. I'm curious how we would make that equitable, because Sherry and Renee both don't work hybrid. I don't know that hybrid was the reason why our last person left, because he's working in office still in the role, as we were told. So, I mean, it's still an in-office job. I think that there are still, I certainly think that it's something to explore, but I think one of the things is we still have records that are kept on site. And that makes the job difficult to be able to examine those records because there are some things still Stone Age in this place. And so someone needs to be on site to like physically go down to whatever floor it may be to ask for these things. So just my 10 cents on that idea.
I have 8 cents.
Okay, 8 cents.
So two things that just came into my mind. One is that there is some political optics that is present now, federal, state, and local, where there's some people, and I presume that these are people who have not been remote or hybrid or working in like the opportunity post 2020, who think that like remote work is completely not work and not efficient, effective, and like a waste of time, or not, people don't do what they're supposed to do. So there's that. So there's gonna be, I think, pressures even from council, if someone wants to support it, that they're like, oh, nobody can work from home successfully. But then it's like, where do you pair that from the pressure to like what the evidence shows? Because I think that's what I would be looking at. And two, when it comes to like, so hybrid, okay, sometimes you do have to be here for records. So that would probably be your Tuesday. Or, and then, because you plan your week, you know what's on site, what's off site. So, or be like, okay, I'm coming into the office, you know, in the afternoon so I can look at that part. So I think that's how someone will plan for that. And lastly, Sherry and Renee, I do hope someday that they get to see part hybrid or remote, because one person could be here and two people at sometimes, but they also, a person could be at home going through emails, going through things that don't require the in-person, because the in-person is really a face of coming upstairs to the 10th floor. Because other than that, you know, I mean, it's always nice to see Sherry here and ask her a question, but at the same time, I also text her, email her, and call her about the same things too. Just my 2 cents. Thank you. 8 cents.
Thank you, Councilman Jackson. So those are, I mean, those are things that we can consider, and those are both great points. The perspective of, does remote work truly do the work? But then we have the confidentiality aspect of the items that need to be accessible at any given time that are on site. So I think we need to look through if that is even a feasible option through OCA for one, before we can even veer off and see if that is an option.
I do have a question, because there are employees who work for the city that have a hybrid type schedule. Do we have a remote work policy in place? And if so, could we see a copy of that?
Yeah, I believe we do.
Yeah, if you could provide the committee a copy of that, I think that would be helpful to understand what other types of city employees agree to as part of a remote work policy. That could also help with the determination.
There may be also an area where we can look at other cities to see if they do, if their internal auditor are remote, or if they're, are you?
No, I'm sorry. I had a comment. I wasn't.
Another option too, to kind of look at both parallels of that. Go ahead.
And I agree. I think these are all very good questions, and we all have good perspectives, and we're posing questions to see how we can best move forward. But I also feel that time is of the essence, and the sooner that we can, you know, kind of wrap our arms around some of the information we've asked for, digest that, and then move forward, we should also try to be expedient in the steps that we take.
Agree with you on that.
Just quick question, for the committee as a whole. In your packet, and when I sent out information to you, I had included multiple job postings because we just did one last year and the year before that. So that you're all focusing on this, the same one. Do you want the most recent one? And I will resend that out in a separate email to all of you. Do you like having the last two?
I'm okay with the most recent for me.
If you're gonna, because your charge was to, you know, look at it and mark it up. I don't want you to be marking up something
That's
from
old.
2 years ago when it was, we posted it and Emily got it, or just last year. So if you want the most recent one, I can send that out to you guys.
That would be great. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
So looks like, yay. So Larry, thank you for your homework that you're gonna be able to provide back to us on that portion of the, I do have one item, but that concludes the internal auditor, but I do have another item to discuss. But is there any other questions that we have? In the meantime, we can have, when Sherry sends over the information, we can look through those, through that old description, and then wait to hear whether we can even proceed with a hybrid option as well.
It's not really a question, just a comment that as we look through the most recent job posting, like, let's take a look at the experience that we're asking for in an internal auditor and also, focus on that. I can't remember if it's the most recent one, but there was one that had 6 years of experience plus credentials. And then if they did not have the credentials, they would be expected to obtain those within the first year of employment. It left me scratching my head a bit because if you have 6 years of professional experience in this area, I guess I don't know if someone could have that experience without being credentialed. So
Yeah.
just something we might want.
And I think there was another one, yeah, that was changed. One was, you had to have a master's degree.
Correct.
And it's changed to a bachelor's degree. So
Okay.
looking at those credentials will be helpful.
And one more thing. So I was on this last year or whenever year it was, and it seemed like we had trouble getting a lot of quality
Candidates.
applicants. And when we're at the interview, we'll also get an idea of people to, I don't know how we're gonna increase that, but we were talking about ideas. I just remember that it was not like, oh, we can get A, B, and C. They're also ideal.
Okay. So how we can have more of a robust field of applicants. So honestly, I think we could look at when the next time we can meet to see and provide all of those ideals, because to Councilwoman Pellegana's point, time is of the essence. And so we want to make sure that we have someone and then go through the full training process and everything, depending on which direction and avenue to go. Sound okay for the internal auditor piece?
Yes.
The next piece that I just want to put on our radar, because we just had an amended budget, is the legislator analysis position. So that is something that is going to be on our radar, that's going to come to us. So we could start thinking about how that looks and maybe simultaneously bring some discussion to that at our next meeting as we are looking to fill that position as well.
Is it correct that historically council has had a legislative or a policy analyst in the past at any time? Are you aware?
Yes.
I'm not familiar with that specific title. A couple years ago, council put money in for a legal, not legislative, but a legal analyst or a legal position. And then the budget was altered and we were able to, they took it a part position from law. But it was more of the legal part, not the legislative part.
I just wondered if there was any previous, even if it was, a decade ago, is there any existing position description within the city that we could at least start as a
Looking at,
baseline for what had been?
I looked in our old obsolete job descriptions and I did not find that title. So
Okay.
I did look, I think it was probably like Tuesday morning,
Okay.
to see if we had that as an option. But we can do some more digging to see, but that wasn't in our practice.
Okay. Yeah.
maybe we can get, if there is a position that has a job description already in any of our surrounding cities, we could probably use that as a template if we haven't had any history of it being for the city of Lansing now.
I reached out to a couple of HR directors in several jurisdictions and no one has that position, but we can do like a wider, cast a wider net on that to see if we get.
Government would have that position.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So I can reach out to Emily and Sarah. They may even have their own within their office. I don't know, but I know that they have the office that marks up all of the legislation for both the House and Senate. So I think there's probably a PD online for that or within the state government website. So we can dig there.
Okay, that would be great. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there too, as we're going to be approaching another position.
Just thinking about it, if it's literally going to be called legislative analyst or something like that, legislation, because the only legislation we really do are the ordinances. So it would be, if it's that title, it would be kind of losing the possible scope we might want them for, because I didn't put this position forward, but I can imagine some needs for it. So I would talk to the person who put it forward exactly what they want, but it seems like we help with all the stuff we do. Especially like the ordinances or the policy, but again, we just do the ordinances, so that's like reduced scope. So maybe it would be a different name, or if it's still within the friendly, however we can do that, because it's just, I mean, how often do we do ordinances besides like, I mean, here and there is the different, the ones that require ordinances, I'm sorry, like, coming to blanks, but it's not that much where it's like we're we're making an ordinance out thing. That's legislation.
So potentially looking at how, because that can go in the job description too, and how we word it and versus getting the right applicants to actually sign for the position too. So-
Yeah, or not pigeon-toeing that person to only doing ordinance work.
Well, I think luckily the PD currently looks like that, so we can have whatever we need.
Yes.
Position description.
Oh, okay.
I think it's an exciting opportunity to craft a role that will serve the needs of council. And I'm excited to move forward with that as well.
Just as soon as the budget gets past its veto opportunities.
Or today.
Is it today? Is today the deadline?
48 hours.
It's 4:30 today.
Yeah, 5 minutes.
So we got 4
Chris
minutes.
Shows up with a
Yeah.
veto.
Right.
Kept waiting out there.
Right, because we've been waiting. That's true. Is there any other discussion for today?
I have nothing further.
Do you want to set the next meeting
Yes.
or do you want to wait and just see what we find out? I mean, I can quickly pull my stuff up and get that out to you guys, but you have other two
Yeah,
departments.
Lisa. O'Leary, how's your time frame as far as getting the information?
So we can get you your policy pretty quickly, but if we're reaching out to other cities, we can get out the request tomorrow, but I don't know how quickly people will respond. So I would give it a week or two, because we'll do a couple follow-ups.
Yeah.
I think 2 weeks would
2
work
weeks.
for me.
So the first week of June?
5th?
Yeah,
We have operations that day at 4, so it would have to fall. Do any of you guys sit on operations? Okay, we could run a meeting simultaneously. One would be here and one would be in there if you wanted to stick to 4 o'clock that day, unless you wanted to do something earlier.
how's the 5th sound for you guys if we do something, do it at the same time?
Good right now, as far as I can tell.
It's fine.
That's fine.
We'll hold it in the chambers then. I'll post it that way.
Fifth at 4.
If for some reason that doesn't work for city TV running, team, the teams, well, I'll let you guys know as soon as I know.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other business? All right, with that, we're adjourned at 4:28.
Brian, can I get you to sign that down there? No, Brian.